what do the peacocks mean to you, and how do you find them for your sculptures?
Well, the peacocks mean a number of things to me. I first started them by loving Flannery O'Connor. And Flannery O'Connor just took my soul with her writing. She was an incredible writer. And she loved peacocks so much. She was very ill a lot of her life, but the last 10 years, incredibly ill. And she had to go back to her family down south. And she used to lay in bed and listen. She bought peacocks because that was her one gift to herself. And she would lay in bed, and she had a metal roof, and she could hear the peacocks walking on her roof because they have these kind of nail-like feet. And she could hear them walking there, and it gave her such great joy. She loved both the peacocks and the peafowls, but she loved in particular how beautiful they were, but also nasty. She loved both sides of them. And her uncle, who he gave them the farm to live on, her mother and her, because it was a one-story level farm, and she had to because she had problems walking, was not the nicest of gentlemen. He would come to collect the rent and come in a huff, and the peacocks knew that he was not kind to them. So they would kind of line up in the driveway like soldiers and not kind of let him in very easily with his car or truck, whatever he brought down. And this annoyed him even further, right? So he would like block the way, and he's trying to get in, and they're blocking the way and hissing at them and spitting. They do this, and they make such a squawk, so much noise. And they just wanted to irritate him to death. And of course, Flannery got such a kick out of this, And she'd come out on the porch and she'd say hello, and the mother would be sweet, and she'd pay him the rent. And he'd also come down to get the fruit off his trees, which he loved to eat, peach and plums and pears. And while he's in there getting coffee and tea with Flannery and the mother, the peacocks were getting up in his trees and eating it, and then spitting the pits at his windshield, just spitting him all. So they're all on the roof of his car, and then they just lay back and they fan their big fans. So when he comes out, they look like the most peaceful peacocks and peafowls. They're all waiting for him to come out. So he has a little bucket to collect his fruit, and there's no fruit on the trees. And he says, "Did you all collect the fruit off our trees?" "Oh no, we would never do that. We know how much it means to you." So he goes to get in his car and hears all these pits on the cover of his car. Mad as hell. Then he goes to drive out, and they spit at him some more, and they all just get in front of the car, and he's driving down the driveway, and they're fanning their big, beautiful peacock feathers as a goodbye to him. And I just, it just endeared her writing even more to me. And she, the peacocks would love her so much that they would irritate this man who had been so ungracious to them and kind of cruel and acted like a king, like he was giving this place to them. And they were so poor, and they didn't have any way really to make this money except the little money that they got from the government. It endeared peacocks to me and made me really look at them in different ways and look at the history of them and look at how different people look at them. And I began to really love them in a very different way. There's so many stories about them.
And how do you find them for your sculptures?
Well, I've loved taxidermy since the 90s. It came about by another sculptor saying, "I know how much you love materials, and we found all these birds that a natural history museum in Canada had dumped in a big dumpster. Would you want them, Petah? And I said, of course. But how are you going to get them from Canada into the United States? She said, don't you worry. I'll pretend I'm pregnant, and I'll just put them all up into my sweatshirt, and I'll just put them up there and put a little stuffing, and I'll come into the United States. Now remember, this is before there were a lot of rules and regulations the way there is now. But she just made this nice big belly, and she went back and forth, I would say like 5 times, brought me the most beautiful songbirds and birds, everything that would have been totally illegal to cross. She would have been put, I know, in jail today. Not then. She could have just said it was a performance piece. She was an artist. She brought these beautiful birds. They were so gorgeous. And what a generous thing for one artist to do for another artist. And every time her husband would lean her down into the chair, and she got early boarding, and she was so pleased. And all the stewardesses, how are you doing? Oh, fine. Would you need anything? No, I'm fine. They began to recognize her because she did it a couple times in the last 2 months of her pregnancy, and she was such a dear. So with that, I began to collect birds and things and really got on this bird path. And so I checked with the Natural History Museum, their man who did all the taxidermy of northeastern birds and songbirds, everything. And I became very good friends with him. And as he got older, he introduced me to his daughter, who is the woman that does all my taxidermy now, and he has since passed away. And she now does all my taxidermy of peacocks. She's a specialist in peacocks, and she just does these beautiful birds, and she poses them the way I want them posed. Now, we get them from a farm up in upstate New York that has over 2,000 peacocks. And if you go up there, you just see all these peacocks roaming all around. They're so gorgeous. And they make their money by peacock feathers because, they lose all their feathers twice a year. They only have full plumage in January and in August. And so the ones that I want, I have tags made around their neck, and it says Petah Coyne, and then I name them, like Jerry or, Samuel or something. And then I take pictures of them, and I have them on my wall, which ones they are. And then if I'm lucky enough and they die in January or August, then we send them right to the taxidermist, and then she makes them up for me.
Of natural causes, right? They die of nature.
Yes. Gosh, I have to wait, because sometimes they don't die then, and he'll call and say, Jerry died in April. And I'll be like, oh, I've been waiting for Jerry for 4 years. Couldn't Jerry have died in August? Couldn't you fed him a little bit more? But Jerry died, no, I would never, ever, they all have to die naturally. And if they don't die naturally in those 2 months, then they're buried in the peacock graveyard. And my only prayers are that they last, they live about 12 to 15 years, and that they die naturally, please, in January or August. That's my only prayers to the peacock gods, So that's the best, right?
Okay.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yes.
If you have it. So this sculpture is called Untitled Number 1383, Sisters to Trees. A lot of your titles come from literary sources. Can you tell us about what this title means and where the inspiration came from?
This inspiration came from a wonderful book by Richard Powers, and it's Overstory. And everyone should read this book because it's so magical. And it's all about how trees they have this underground system. It's like government. And two trees next to each other are like sisters. They have these roots that connect and they talk and and if one sister isn't doing well, this tree will feed it more. If it needs water, it gets more water. And they have communities, and it's kind of like if this community over here needs more vitamins, through root systems you get more vitamins to that. It reminded me so much like Doctors Without Borders. They do this whole thing. It was such a great storybook. And I got the tree from Elizabeth, who runs 7 or 8 farms, huge farms, all kinds of farms. She's such a generous person. And she has a number of orchards. And she, every year, when orchards are up and they are producing enough, then she has to take down the trees, and she puts in new trees that will then produce more after a certain amount of years. And I was calling everybody for trees, and someone said, oh, you should try her. She's the one who started the fresh vegetables and market in 14th Street in New York about 25 years ago. She's one of the most generous people I've ever met. And I called her and said, could I get a tree from you? She said, absolutely, come get this tree. Whatever you want, you can have whatever trees you want. How many do you want? So the first time I got one. And then the second time I couldn't find the perfect looking tree. And my assistant said, take two, we'll put them together. And I thought, sister trees, I'll take 2 trees together. And when we first put it up, we made a shadow. And here we're going to have a little bit of a shadow on the wall too. And that is the sister of the tree. But they're together. They are always together. We put them together. We put them together so that they are the sisters. A lot of the branch, one sister has the I don't want to say the stem, the main branch, and then all the other branches are both of the trees. And so I think it's so beautiful because that's what a family is, right? It's never one, it's a community. And I think and you can't tell what it is. And also, if you look closely at it, all the knots and everything on the tree, I made all those knots because I wanted it knotted and gnarly. So I carved all those knots and then put them on the trees. They're covering up a lot of things, but I also wanted it to be, that it's this special knotted, gnarly, because that's what we get through life. We get all these knots and gnarly things, like maybe you had cancer or a real big illness in your family, or maybe you had it, or whatever. You have these troubles in life, and they leave scars on you. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's not a horrible thing. It's a more beautiful thing. It's like a mark that you have, and I think that's something more wonderful than not. And so I wanted to have that on the tree. And so it's there with the peacocks. And the peacocks also take the souls to heaven. So when it's ready for the souls to go to heaven, the peacocks decide that, and they take the souls and they fly off and go to heaven, which is also a beautiful thing.
That's wonderful. I know you've got limited time. Anything else you want visitors to know about this piece?
I hope the visitors put their own energy into it and see their own stories. My mother used to have us do that. She would take us to the beach and she would see a beached whale, and she would take us out of school and she would say the whale is very old, but look at the marks on the whale. Every mark is a story, and you make up your own story about this whale, because that is what is special. It doesn't have to be his story, it can be your story, and that makes it even more exciting. So I hope they will come here, see the tree, see something special they like, and make up their own story about this tree. And that will become then their tree, and that's what I hope for this tree, for its long life forever.